they had heard of Baba, and Baba was very, as Keith knows, Baba was popular because of Pete Townsend, because of Rolling Stone magazine. I also remember seeing his poster there on a huge billboard one time on a freeway in the
San Francisco? Yeah, on the Bay Bridge.
yeah.
But that's a little later.
Okay.
The Rolling Stone thing didn't happen until 71.
Okay, that was
magazine.
later, yeah.
And the poster went up, I think, in 69.
Right, that was after I moved up there, because I didn't move up there until 69.
But just the same, you described the way the world was.
So anyway, then this...
You were reading the discourses.
So I had gone... I think I had moved to Santa Barbara in late 67, so I was there a few months, and then it was the summer of 68 when or before the summer, it might have been the spring, but anyway, it was about that time in early 68 when I bought the discourses, and then I spent basically many days and weeks, went into weeks of just really intensely, I mean, it's almost as if I was meditating on what I was reading and taking it to heart, and it's sort of, it was, in other words, almost like a class in spirituality that I was like every section that I would open, whatever it was, on meditation or all these different things, and selfless service and all that, and every subject that I turned to had all this depth of information, and somehow I felt it to be very true. I had read, off and on I had read different things. I was sort of, even at that time in Santa Barbara, I was drawn to, there was a Red Lion bookstore that Tim Owens and a few other people worked at, and it was just this huge bookstore, and it was like a wonderful place to go visit, because every section, whether it was philosophy, psychology, was so complete, because they had the classics. They had all the classics that everybody would study if you're going to college. But then they would have all the new thinkers, all the avant-garde thinkers, all the people who were, somebody would say, oh, this guy's crazy, but yet they would have his work there because you could get it, you could see it, and you could judge for yourself or read it. And so they had, I used to go there a lot and sit and read, and it was a wonderful time because there was a lot of freedom to do that. And I didn't have to go to work. And I didn't do much of anything.
Steve, did you find some kind of difference during your reading of Baba books and other books of philosophy and spirituality?
Well, there was always a connection, because I remember I read Yogananda was one of the earlier books. I read Listen Humanity was one of the first Baba books I think I ever read, and then the discourses I bought. I read the Rosicrucians, I read Ramakrishna, I read a lot of stuff, but prior to my contact with Baba, the things that I read, and I read the Bible, I read,
Is this at this stage intellectual search, or have you already got the conviction that Baba is who he said he was?
I think there was something happening. It was more an emotional search, and it wasn't intellectual, because I would read and contemplate. So it was more a mental process. Although my heart at least, when I would just look at Baba's photo, that did more to me than the mental, but that was a deeper effect on me. Although it was a mental exercise, because I was not one to read a lot, and then all of a sudden I'm reading all this stuff and really contemplating and thinking about it, and I noticed as I read more, my understanding, there was a depth that happened, that created there. It wasn't per se intellectual understanding, but it was more maybe organizational thinking, or backed by the emotion of feeling something from that. And so definitely the more I read, the more I could understand and put in some sort of a framework.
It was an enrichment of your own
definitely
awareness.
An enrichment, but it also goes on, because that's sort of really, this is the beginning of that experience. But at the time it was I needed to still the mind and to use the mind and to organize my thoughts. And I think I hadn't done that. That's when I was in school and going through all that, it was all disorganized and it wasn't clear. It wasn't like you have a direction and you're going that direction. You choose to go that direction, like my brother did with his banking and all. But so along about that time, I can't remember which came first. I mean, it doesn't really matter. They're both so significant in my relationship with Baba. But I think the first was I had heard about Silence Day. Not Silence Day. I'd heard about people keeping silent. And somehow there was a group in Isla Vista, there was a few group of Baba people who I met, and what's her name, who lived here? Andrea Wernsimer and a few others were the Tim Barnhart and Tim Owens. A couple others, anyway, were there. And I remember going once or twice to sort of a little Baba group, and we would sit and read and discuss Baba and everything, and it was wonderful. I was still also going through the phase I was in, and so I wasn't really, committed. I mean, I wasn't feeling 100% that I understood Baba and everything. But
were you totally out of drugs from earlier before that?
Yeah. I had quit about that time, before that time of coming to Santa
And it
Barbara.
had never been a big draw for you. You hadn't done a lot of it.
I had done my share, but I always had a sense. In fact, I had experiences on drugs. The first time I took LSD, I knew that there was a reality beyond our perception, that there was something larger than my own perception of what I thought was reality or normal consciousness. But I also had an insight that as the drug wore off and I came back to normal consciousness, that I knew that wasn't real, even though I was attracted to it because of what I experienced. But at the time there were people doing that. There were people taking, especially LSD, which I took earlier. And that was really the first awareness I had that there might be levels of consciousness, because I had no idea before that there was anything other than the way you live and the way you eat and work and nothing. I had no clue. I mean, other than I hadn't even read about it in a mystical sense. So that experience was so strong to me that I knew that somehow I felt there's a truth somewhere that's beyond what I was experiencing, that reality, a deeper reality, maybe not because I didn't know what truth was at that point, but maybe I felt there was a deeper reality because I saw around me people taking drugs like they would abuse alcohol, they would abuse smoking, and abuse drugs the same way. Initially, when I took it, people were more concerned that it was for, like they would go look at the sun, or they would contemplate the stars, or they would ask questions about God. So it was more self-directed, although that was very short-lived. There were only a few people I knew that kind of wanted to do it for spiritual reasons, like the Indians, because the Indians would take peyote and take drugs, and they would reach God, and they would have visions and all that. But other people were trying that, but getting lost in the drugs. So at that time, I was not taking drugs. I had realized also that from reading Baba that drugs weren't the way. And
did you come across any such statement about drugs?
I do remember. Actually, I've had the statement before. I heard about it because I remember something that was printed, and I even have a copy of it. God in a Pill. But before that, there was a sheet printed somewhere, whether it was, somehow I got it maybe in Santa Barbara. I still have it. I think it was in 1968. And it might have been sent by Rick Chapman and one of those guys. But it just said that it was like what God in a Pill says, the drugs are not the way, and basically it's not worth doing and all that. So I had that assurance from Baba. So I was not, at that time I was tired of not wanting to be into drugs anyway, because I also never, I took drugs, and I saw people that killed themselves in drugs and ended up, lost their lives. So I knew that it wasn't something I cared to pursue at all. So I always had an early on a sense of that. Fear also when I saw people on heroin when I was a kid and saw them skinny as a skeleton with tattoos all over their bodies. And when I was in junior high, I had a friend who, some family member was a Hell's Angel or something, and I remember seeing these guys at their house, and they were drug addicts, and they were committed drug addicts, heroin addicts. And so that, I was so scared as a young boy, I just go, I will never shoot a needle in my arm, never, just I couldn't do that. Even as a little kid, it scared me. And I just ran out of the room, ran out of their house. So that sort of saved me, I think, for later on. And so at that time, I heard that, and I actually don't know who I went with, but it might have been Sam Irving and his wife, but because they were in that area at that time. But there was Silence Day in '68, and we went to Meherabad, which is where Baba visited. That's in Ojai, California. Meherabad, where Agnes Barron lived. She was a lady who followed Baba. Baba told her to keep the property for me, and to this day it's now a retreat for people. It's kind of a universal retreat, but she had saved it all those years from the 50s for Baba, maybe before 40s, 50s. But so Baba had spent time there. He had stopped there on his trips through the West. I don't know how many times, maybe 2 or at least twice. And so I went there, and I met Agnes Barron, who was a really wonderful lady, very strong lady, very, in other words, if someone came up there, she might just come up to you and say, "What are you doing in your life?" Or, and she'd say, "Do you take drugs?" And if they say yes, she'd say, "Why do you do that? Stop that nonsense and do something for humanity." And she just was that directed, and she could see through everyone. I mean, she had this directness. It was actually stronger than that, and it scared you, but she was direct, and she would say, it's time to do work for humanity, stop this foolishness. And she chased people out of there if they took drugs. She'd say, "Get out of here, don't even come around here." And so I met her, and we did this. We were doing work around the property, cleaning weeds and things, and it was a wonderful day. And I remember just being in silence, and she was such a strong personality. She almost reminded me of Baba in some of her facial gestures, because she sort of would look like Baba at an older age without her teeth and stuff. But she could be very demanding and very strong, and she could just point, like, "Don't pull that up," which meant don't pull the flower up, and you would be almost like you were reprimanded, as if how Baba could do that by his gesture or by his face. And that was a wonderful day. I spent the whole day there, and I remember going to this tree that Baba had been to, and I sat there in this spot where Baba was, and I remember having, basically it was an experience of, because at the time I was also going through these state of restlessness, agitation, all that. I was more centered because I had been reading Baba. I had little bits of, strength given me on the way, a little of wonderful little, what would you call them? Like little caresses, by Baba on the way to keep doing what you're doing. You're going the right way, kind of thing. And so I remember sitting at this tree, and all of a sudden, I was just sort of meditating, being quiet for quite a long time. I sat there, I don't know, a few hours. And all of a sudden I had this experience of, it was almost as if my mind, as my thoughts, emotions, everything that I had kept inside here and was trying to, almost trying to fashion things that you could never fashion. I mean, to try to organize, like an emotion or a thought process, and trying to do this when there's hundreds of them hitting at the same time. And I remembered sitting there sort of going through all that and thinking of Baba, and all of a sudden it felt as just my mind was disintegrating, like all the thoughts, all the emotions were just being erased, as if they were just being washed away, taken, they were gone, basically. All the anxiety, all the restlessness, all the everything that I'd carried, that I'd had as growing up, as I'd had from my parents, as a kid. And it was such a release and such
total wipe out. Sort of
completely. I mean, it's hard to explain because I was so empty. I couldn't express it because I was trying to find things to attach to, and there was nothing there. There were, because we always have an anxiety or a hurt or a. Anyway, it's a wonderful cleansing. Well, that's all I can say. I can't really describe it because there's no intellectual words for it. But more so a cleansing, and it felt good. I was kind of relieved in the sense that I didn't have to deal with all the stuff I was dealing with and had been dealing with all the time through taking drugs and people and all that stuff. And I didn't really, it was so natural, I didn't think of it as being an experience or any of that. In fact, I negated all those experiences for years. Because in those days, I think it was understood that if something's real, you don't even tell anyone about it. I mean, I always had that, and I carried that. But so this went on, and it was a wonderful cleansing. And I was sort of I was dazed, I guess, as a word for it. I mean, dazed in a good way, in the sense that I was just almost I didn't have anything. I mean, nothing to say, nothing mentally to attach to, so it was a wonderful release. It was just free. So I remember, going back home and, I didn't think much of it because it was so natural and so much a part of, even though I knew that whatever was there was not there anymore. We had lessened. And so that was another real strong feeling that I knew that Baba was something great, and that, whether I assumed he did that. I mean, I felt it was him. But at the time, like I say, it just happened so naturally that I just thought, oh, it's part of the process of being here in silence with Baba, and maybe it happens to everyone, maybe it doesn't, I don't know. So that sort of went on, and I felt really good, and I ended up going back to Santa Barbara. And I remember probably sometime later that summer, it was pretty much a summer night, but I heard that I saw a Baba poster, and I saw that Rick Chapman was coming to talk at an auditorium, and so I was very struck by the poster. Of course, the first I saw Baba, and I don't think the group that we had, we weren't meeting a lot. I mean, this happened to be maybe an off time or something, but I just remembered I was so joyed that Rick Chapman is coming, and I didn't know who he was, and it just said a Baba talk and a film, and so.
Was that your first film?
Yeah, so I went. It was like it had to have been a summer night because I remember the night, but could have been a fall night. So it was sometime in late summer, early fall. 68. And I went to the talk, and I don't remember the talk in the sense of all that Rick had said. I remember his presence. I remember him having presence on the stage, and being able to talk, and he was a good speaker. Right. But I remember, the thing I remember the most was when he talked about Baba, and then he said that Meherabad says that drugs are no good, that one can't find God through drugs, and that you must stop them and all. And I remember at the time I went into the auditorium, how people sort of talk, and because they don't really respect someone, say someone's a speaker and the film was not on. So I could hear sort of movings and, people listening, but it's not as if people...
Not quite receptive audience.
Yeah, not as if people would listen to Rick Chapman today. Baba lovers would, listen to hear what he had to say. And these were just people from college, people from, a lot of them just going there because somebody's showing a film and somebody's talking about India or something. And I remember when he said that about no drugs, there was like pin drop silence in the whole auditorium, and everyone just like stopped, like, what is this guy saying, And then there was a little, Gerber going around and things like that. So then a few people got up and walked out, and of course the people who were stoned just probably said, hell with this guy. But a lot of people stayed, not a lot left, but a few of the hardcore druggies probably just said hell with it and left. And I remember, that's all I remember of the experience, because I wasn't really, it's hard to say, I must have remembered him talking, but it doesn't register about what he said. And I know he talked about Baba, and that was important to me, but about Baba's life and stuff, which we all know. And nothing really stuck intellectually. I mean, just because he was talking, and I was more just experiencing the room, and I think there was a picture of Baba, so I was probably just looking at that. Then he showed this film of Baba.
Yeah.
And the film was, I don't even remember what film, but I remember seeing Baba, and I was totally transported. I mean, it was as if I know that Baba was there. I mean, physically, he was on that screen. He was in that room. He was up there. And at the time, I didn't associate any of that with what I felt later, but because when something happens, it's so natural, yeah, never even thought of it. But I was in a blissful state. I mean, the whole time the film was on, it was as if I was in bliss. There was nowhere else to be. Nothing else existed. The auditorium disappeared. All I saw was Baba, and Baba was there, and I was just completely locked into that the whole time. And I don't even remember. I remember the film finishing, and I was sort of stunned because I'd had all these emotions, and I was just not able to probably describe anything. It was just too great. And so I remember just looking at the screen, and then of course Rick Chapman stopped, and I don't think I even went up and talked to him at all or anything. I might have, I don't remember, I have no recollection. I was just in a daze. And I remember going outside, and I looked at the stars, and at first I thought I must be having a reaction to some LSD I took years ago. I might be having what they call a relapse, or something, because I was just totally euphoric, and I was like, in a sense, in a blissful state. Just felt happy. I was so happy I couldn't contain it. And I thought, wow, God, what is this? What is causing this? And then I somehow, for whatever reason, because I was so detached from it, I didn't really, at that moment, say it was Baba. I don't know why. I mean, it seems weird that I wouldn't, but I was just in a state where I was dazed, and I didn't really, it wasn't intellectual. I couldn't think, I didn't even think. It wasn't a question of even using a thought process. It didn't work. It wasn't functioning. And so I walked outside, and I remember looking at the stars, and I felt so close that Baba was the stars, and we're, basically one, and it was all this sort of stuff, but it wasn't intellectual. It was just a feeling that I felt so close. And that lasted for days, and I was kind of, I don't remember why I didn't do much of anything. I hardly ate for a couple of days, but I ate, but I had no desire to do anything. And I remember just going to the beach and sitting, and
Keith, it was something that had happened to people who had actual physical darshan of Baba. They also went out of the normal schedule of work. They would just lie, just sit, and feel and experience the happiness that has been brought to them by the physical darshan. So you might have something of that kind coming to him, even through a film.
Wow. I'd felt that it wasn't just a film. Even when I was watching it, I knew that I felt Baba alive. I mean, when he was gesturing. Anyway, I had that experience, and I was pretty much just kind of in that state of reading about Baba, sort of contemplating things, and then at that point, after some time of having obviously a deeper experience of who Baba was, what he was in my life, I had a stronger desire, and I think it was mainly a lot from reading discourses and maybe reading other things, but it might have come more from the discourses of really wanting to go back and tell my parents that I was following Meherabad, and that I felt that he was the avatar in this age, that he was the Christ.
Your dad was dead. So
Yeah.
it would be your
My mother had
and
remarried.
Stepfather?
Yeah, they had
Okay, got it.
remarried, and yeah, he was a Mason. He was very rigid in a sense, but he was, in terms of duty and honor and honesty, he was
By Mason you mean
Freemason.
Freemason, and he
Lodge.
was of the highest level
Oh, I
that you
see.
could possibly get. Yeah.
And,
He was respected by all different groups because they would call him to do the funerals and the weddings. And, anyway, he had this quality, but he was not an emotional person. He couldn't share emotion. So about the time I was in junior high, my mother remarried. They both worked for the government, and they both met there, and he agreed to marry her and take on raising 5 children. So I was the youngest, and I was probably the most molded by him because of that. The others were older, and my oldest brother didn't, it was very hard to take on a father figure after losing your father when he was like 8 at that time. So anyway, that sort of, my mother remarried, and they were, the time I went through high school and part of junior college, he was there. So he was my basically father, but they call him stepfather in America. And so I had a strong desire that I needed to go tell them about Baba. And I wanted to go back and clear those accounts because I felt I needed to do that for myself, because I just left and not told them where I went, and they didn't know where I was. I never called them or anything. So prior to that, I got a job at this place, car wash in Santa Barbara. I started out just washing cars by hand. You know how they would wash cars here with a little cloth. And all I wanted to do was go work for the lowest pay possible, wash the cars, think of Baba, and not talk to anyone. And so it was a very easy job for doing that because you don't have to interact with anyone. And I needed to make some money, and I wanted to go back home to tell my parents. So I had to start making money because I had no job at that time. So I took this menial job for a minimum wage, and within a month, or less than a month, 3 weeks or something, I was the manager of this place, and I had like 30 workers that I had to manage, and I was doing all the accounting, all the books, and I was running the place. We would wash like 150 cars on a Saturday, and I had to do 2 jobs usually because people wouldn't show up, so you have to run and take the money, then you have to drive the car, hook the car up, you run back and wash half of it, run back and take the car off, just crazy stuff. But I did this, and fortunately from my stepfather, I had good work habits because I could work really hard, harder than most people. And so it's very easy. Any job I took, they always thought I was the best worker, and they would want me to, stay or promote me. So at this time, the fellow who owned the car wash was a very nice man. He had a daughter. He didn't have a son, so he treated me like a son. He really liked me, and he owned 2 or 3 car washes in Santa Barbara. And business-wise, I became the manager, and I was making this money. I was making a lot more money than when I started. But I knew that I was going to visit my parents, and prior to that, his best friend flew down in his airplane from Oregon, and he was a guy who designed these automatic car wash systems. It was his idea to put them all over America, and he came and talked to him, and they were going to set up all of California first. So they wanted me to manage them all. He said, I want you to manage all of California. And I said, I quit, I'm leaving, I'm going to tell my parents about Baba. And as far as a business opportunity, because they would have given me part of the company and all that, in terms of money, it was worth a lot. Our career, at least in business. And I just said, no, I'm leaving. I am going to tell my parents about Baba. And he was brokenhearted because he really liked me, and he thought he was going to, give me all this opportunity. And I just said, no, I quit. I'm leaving, and I'll leave when you can get someone else to take my place. So I worked another week or 2 or something and left. So I went back to San Bernardino and told my parents about Baba, which was not what I thought it would be, but they accepted it. But what I said, they thought maybe I was still taking drugs, or I had gone off the deep end somewhere, but they did listen to what I had to say. They understood that I wasn't taking drugs. So they knew that that was a change, that was good, that I don't take drugs, and I was somehow being more directed in life. And so I stayed with them for a while, not long, just a few months. I got this job working because my dad was a government, what do you call it? Anyway, he was a contract administrator for the government, and he gave out millions of dollar contracts to rocket industry when that was the time of the rocket industry being very strong. And so he would review the contracts, and his word would say, yes, go with Roar Aircraft or TRW or all these different companies. And he was very respected, and he wouldn't take a bribe. Most of the time they would offer you a Cadillac car or anything if you would, slant the contract their way. And he wouldn't do it. He was noted. He wouldn't take a pen or a pencil because you weren't allowed to by the government. And so he wouldn't take a pencil from anyone. And so he had that sort of honesty, which I respected, and that was one of the qualities later that I learned to really respect. And so I got a job working in the desert, doing this hot tar, some buildings, putting hot tar on these roofs where they melt the tar and it's very hot. And that was like late '68. I went out and worked in the desert, and I worked with this crew of guys, and it was very good money for the work, but very hard work. And I stayed in a little trailer, and it wasn't exciting, and the pay was pretty good for that kind of hard labor. And what happened one day, I was walking with two big hot tar pails full of tar. They're several hundred degrees. And I felt like someone stuck a knife in my back, and I dropped both buckets, and the tar splattered on me. And so it burnt me. And then I had to go to the hospital, and of course I lost the job because I couldn't go back to work because I was burned. And so that sort of brought me back home, because this was a few hundred miles away, and I ended up going back to my family's house, my parents' house. But I was really lucky that I had first and second degree burns. No third. I had maybe one slight third, but nothing on my face. It was mostly the parts of the body. And luckily, it was just bubbles splashes that went on. So it wasn't that bad. I didn't have to have skin grafts and all that. But I had to wear different patches and do all that for some time. But anyway, so I'm sitting basically at home about the time that Baba drops the body. And meanwhile, when I'm in San Bernardino, I found at the time there was a Baba lover there, Robert Holcomb, his father was the mayor of San Bernardino. And I used to think it was funny because on TV they would say, his name was Bob, the mayor, and so they'd say Mayor Baba, all the time, because a journalist would be asking him a question about something, and this fellow...
Mayor Bob said.
And so he'd say, Mayor Bob, tell us, Baba, tell us, and so I always heard that, on TV or something whenever his father was the mayor of the town, and at the time I did know Robert Holcomb. I did know him in high school. I didn't know he was a Baba lover. He was a Sufi, and he played sitar, and I guess he's still in the Bay Area. But, so I was back home, and then I remember I was with some of these other same friends that I was with before had come back they would go back and forth to San Bernardino, either selling their clothes and different things. And I was with a couple of those friends, and they had said that Mayor Baba dropped the body or died. Someone had told me that I was with. They were a group of they were more or less school friends. They weren't close friends. And they said that Mayor Baba has died, and I remember hearing almost the shock of that Baba had died, but as I had read so much and I had felt so much, it didn't sink in like it was a shock in a sense, but it was more reverberating in me, like, oh, Baba's dropped the body. What's that mean to me? I didn't know him. I had only seen him in a film, and I didn't know his body. I never got to meet him. I never really, even prior to that, had a longing to meet him, or wasn't that strong, because I had those experiences of him and seeing him in the film, although the shock hit me too that I'd missed seeing him because I was not able to see him because he's now died, And so I felt that sort of, and all those things were going on in my head at that time. And I remember one of my friends said that, your master's dead, he can't help you now because he's dead. How can he help you if he's not here? This fellow had said that to me. And I remember I was sort of in shock. I was basically contemplating everything because Baba was who my life was about. I was following him. I'd given my life, as much as I knew at that time. And so I was kind of in shock. And then I remember I had an experience again of as if his hands caressed me. And this overwhelming warm feeling, this feeling of just this whole feeling came over me of warmth and compassion, and it was as if someone is just holding you. And that's the only way I can describe that kind of feeling, because I was so much in shock that I recognized that, but I couldn't, relate to it at that time, what it meant to me. And I could feel just this everything, as if every cell in my body was exploding. And then I just turned to them and I said, he never dies, he's always here, he's always with us. And I had that conviction was so strong that I knew it was true. It was not that he dies. I mean, his physical body may die, but
his presence remains.
From that moment I could feel him, and I knew that assurance that I had that his, he is alive, he's here, he never dies. And I told them that, and of course they sort of laughed or something, and then I was kind of in shock even after hearing that, and I didn't know what to do. In fact, because I had been home recently with all this from the job, and I didn't really know what to do because I had no connections with groups at all. I didn't know. At that time, I kind of knew there was an LA group. I hadn't met the people, Phyllis Frederick yet. I think I did in that year. Though in fact, soon after I met all of them. But at the time, I had no other contacts. The only connection I had was the people in Santa Barbara, and there was no real group, no real, mailings or any of that. In fact, the last thing I ever read before on that silence day was that Baba's warning to his lovers about stay away from those people who have multicolored this or that. And I remember I have that copy that I got somewhere. Maybe that was at Santa Barbara.
I'm sorry.
People who claim that they have powers, people who
shun those masters,
shun
like
those-
multicolored.
something, and it was a statement
like neon signs.
yeah.
Like neon signs.
Yeah.
I think that's
And
what
all
it
of that.
is.
If anyone professes to be great or this or that, don't listen to them and all that. So I remembered that, I mean, I don't know. I mean, that came up later also. But yeah, I remember that was the last thing I'd read, which really didn't, that didn't help me in what I was feeling being at home. So I didn't really know what to do. I kind of went home in shock, and it was very hard because I was at home and there was no jobs at that time. I couldn't, after losing that job, jobs were even harder to get. I kind of thought about going to school, but I really didn't want to stay at my parents' house because it just, their attitude was such that I wasn't productive, and I knew that I had to do something on my own, whatever that was, and I couldn't stay in that environment because I wasn't happy, basically. Even though they had sort of accepted that I was following Meherabad, but they didn't have a deep understanding either of who Baba was, and what I was going about. So I remember struggling at that time, and I had another friend who taught karate, who I knew, and was close to him and his brother. And so I saw him in town, and he said that he was moving to San Rafael, Northern California, and he was going to take his school up there, and he was going to teach karate in the Bay Area, and move up there. So he gave me his address and said, come on up. And So it was another real strong contact because I had none prior to that. And I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't want to stay in that same environment. And living in Los Angeles, it's east of Los Angeles, but it's the same feeling. It's not a very, the atmosphere is not real positive. It's not a high spiritually charged area, the whole LA scene. So I knew I had to leave, so I ended up leaving again, but this time I just told my parents I'm going up to see about a job and this and that and moving to Northern California. So I moved up to the Bay Area, and I actually stayed with that friend of mine and helped teach karate.
What is that?
Karate, this sort of kung fu,
Oh.
where they do movements, and it's also fighting, but
Chinese.
yeah, Chinese and Japanese. But his was
Karate.
his was a form of called karate, but he was very proficient, and he had one of the toughest schools in California. But he also went through transformation, and he realized that he didn't want to fight, so he would never fight anyone, but he would teach his students to control their fighting. In other words, if you could almost punch and kick where you come within a millimeter of hitting someone, but you don't hit them, that shows that you have control, but you don't hit them and hurt them. Where most schools in America, they were hitting each other, breaking legs, and just fighting, basically. So then
He has been Sankalpa has
Let's
been
stay
doing-
on the path here, because we're running out of time.
okay.
So go ahead.
So then I studied with him, and he was a very good teacher. He would have dreams of dance movements that would, these katas they're called, they would come to him in his dreams. And he'd wake me up and say, look at this one. And he would show all these movements that just would flow from him. So long about that time, I remembered that flyer that I had read, that Baba said, stay away from these people. And he had a following. We taught like 60 people a class, and he was very popular, and he started feeling like he, I don't know, was
Roshi.
a master, basically. And so I knew that I couldn't stay into that, because I was almost one of his first students, and I couldn't do that. I mean, which meant I had to carry on his thing. So I just told him I'm leaving. I told him that I'm following Meherabad and blah, 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 blah. And so I left there, and I moved in with other people, and I moved around different places. And long about that time, I ended up being a caretaker of some property on Mount Tam.
What about 69 Darshan and the flight and all that? Did you?
See, I was there, moved there in '69. I was sort of out of the loop. I did go in '69. I met Ivy Deuce. I looked up in the phone book, and I saw Mayor Baba's name under something, and so I went and called, and I went to Sutter Street, I remember, and I met Ivy Deuce. And I talked to her, and I was more happy that as soon as I walked in, I saw Baba's photo. And I was in bliss just looking at Baba's photo. And I remember talking to her, and I was not what I would call at that time Sufi material. I had long hair, and I just remembered she was very nice, and she was a very, sweet lady. And I didn't know anything really about the Sufis. I knew kind of Sufism and stuff. So then I met her, and then I found out that there was a group in Berkeley. And it was probably later in '69, because at the time I moved way out in the valley, and I lived quite a few months before I really found out there was a Berkeley group. And at that time I didn't know of any groups. I knew that knew there were some Baba people around, but I didn't know of any groups. In fact, I was too busy teaching and doing all this stuff with the classes to really even research it. I did try to, in the phone book in San Francisco, all I found was Ivy Deuce. And then I heard about a Berkeley group, and somehow I was able to get over there. I don't know when the '69 Darshan must have been in May, right, or something?
Mm-hmm.
So this was probably after that, because when I first started going to Berkeley, and I met Mick and Ursula, Robert Dreyfus, Rick Chapman, Scott McCaig was actually going to school at that time or nearby. There were a few other people I remember. Rich Leverton, there were all kinds of people's names. But I met them, and I remember Maristana, we would have meetings there, and very free, very open, and crazy, and I got over there as not a lot, but every other month or something I would come and try to.
Have you been to Myrtle Beach?
Yeah, so that comes later. I lived there. So what happened, I met a lot of these people, and I guess they'd come back because they started telling about Myhro, they started telling about Erich, they told about Mani, they told about Baba's last darshan. It must have been the last darshan because they talked about the tomb and experiences that these people had. So I had, even in all my journey with experiences that I had with Baba, I had not the slightest desire to go to India. I had nothing. I could care less in this lifetime. I mean, and I felt strong enough that if for many lifetimes I don't care about coming to India. I had no desire. But it was only when I heard these stories about, especially Myhro mainly, and then the tomb, Baba's tomb. Baba, built this place and had this tomb where his body is and all that. Then I, of course, connected the stories and the experiences, and then I wanted to. At that time, then I felt I really wanted to connect and to maybe go to India, but I had no money. I was scraping hand to foot, just doing odd jobs, and teaching, and we weren't really making a lot of money. We did a lot of stuff for free. We would take people and train them in body balance and conditioning, and we would take people who had medical problems and spend hours with them. So it was that was more just a service thing that we did with all these groups. So I got a desire then to go to India, and then I realized I had to have so much money to go to India, and at that point I got a job and I tried to
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
Um,
There's only a couple more stories, and then I go right into.
all right, fine.
Okay, let's have all these stories then.
Go for it.
Yeah. So at that point, then I did save enough money, and I was able to go to India. It took about a year and a half or something. In 1972, I came and was in India for 4 months, and basically had a real deep connection with Pendu. Was my closest mandali that I seemed to. Pendu, which I became real close to, and sat with him all the time and spent a lot of time with him. And then all the experiences of just being here and to have the freedom to be with Erich and all of them, and to meet Myhro and have experiences of that was quite a lot then. I mean, there was more freedom then to be with him and associate with him. There were things that went on, but nothing. I mean, it was a wonderful pilgrimage. It was more just really the experience of being with him. One could go on for hours talking about little things, and it was just the fact of being with him, and being in awe of Myhro, and being able to sit on the porch and hear her, her love for Baba. So I then went back, and I ended up moving to Myrtle Beach, and I lived there, worked there and lived there, and sort of spent time on the center. Ended up saving enough money, and so I could go back to India for 4 more months.
Would you tell us something about the shrine, visit to the shrine of Baba?
Which shrine?
Myrtle Beach.
Well, I remember the first time I came there, because all I had was an address. I knew that there was Myhro Spiritual Center in Myrtle Beach. I was really just walking into Baba's arms. And I had that feeling and that experience throughout the whole time on the center. And I always felt that, and it was such peace and such a different experience. I didn't experience that in India. I mean, I experienced glimpses of that or hints of that through Myhro and maybe moments alone, but I hadn't. That experience was as if it was everywhere. All the air was filled with Baba's presence and Baba's love. For me, anyway. I don't know, other people have different, but so that stayed with me, and I was just the whole time. I was on the center. I felt that, and so I had moments that were wonderful in the lagoon cabin, and I think in the barn experiencing things, but I mean, no major things, but just wonderful experiences of feeling warm and feeling love and feeling sheltered in a way, almost as if you were coming from this horrible bad world and you were just, someone was hugging you and just like as a child and caressing you. So I had that feeling throughout the whole time that I was ever on the center. And I worked there, and of course working there you were only allowed on the center certain times. They have meetings, and so I'd go to the meetings and listen to music and watch films and all that. But the time there was, I think, harder in the sense because I was in this community that was a very strange community that you had to work and you had all this hustle bustle, and then it was always wonderful to come off of those streets and to go into that atmosphere, which was just wonderful. But it was hard in a sense because it was almost as if you could only have it once a week or whenever they allowed you on the center because you were a resident. You weren't.
Steve, that's all center politics, and I don't want to deal with that on the tape,
Okay.
although I know all about that. Do you want to maybe go for Mani's passing? Because not many people know about that.
Yeah. Okay. And what happened?
The story exists.
Yeah.
All right, well, I can take it off of there.
There's a
Yeah.
beautiful write-up.
There's a good write-up.
One page.
Actually, it's probably easier if you just read that, and
Yeah, I
because
think so,
if
yeah.
I narrate the
Yeah,
whole story, I
I'll
might
ask
miss.
you questions if I don't,
Yeah.
if I don't make sense.
And that's easier. So
Okay.
to just recap, I then went home for a period of time, and then
I'm missing one thing. I'm missing your experiences or whatever it was in the Samadhi, the tomb, Baba's tomb.
I think, basically, in those early days, those experiences were so ongoing because there were times when I would sit in the Samadhi for 4 or 5 hours, and in those early days, Mansari would feed me, and I would just stay at the tomb, and so it's hard to explain because it's almost as if words really can't describe. It's just actually nothing happened, which was more wonderful than stuff happening. It was just as if you were in a vacuum with Baba, just totally. Things happened. I felt things lessening in myself, and I would get awarenesses. I would get intuitive sense. It was so many. Nothing. I guess nothing like a vision or not of that sense. But it was always rewarding and always ongoing. It was alive. It was basically.
Nakita, I would like to ask you 2 more questions because it's concluding almost. One would be, what about the musical side, singing in the tomb, how it came first, and second question would be, how it happened that you were inclined to stay on
Well, I think
in
that
Meherabad?
that initial desire probably sprung from my connection with Pendu. At least that's what I feel, and that connection from Pendu was so strong that he would always say, "Do Baba's work, because that's all he did." And so I think later on that sort of became what it was that's planted that seed in me, because I always, even when I went home after 75, I got married, helped raise 2 children. The whole time I wanted to come back to India, and I wanted to be here inwardly, and that got stronger and stronger and stronger till about 87, 88. And I really didn't have the money at the time to try to come back, and I had saved money, and then my stepfather died, and he had put some money away in an account. Are you recording or not?
No, no.
Okay, good. So he put some money away in an account, and then my mother called me in one day, and I had anticipated that I wanted to come to India,
Yeah.
and when I counted that money, it was to the dollar that I wanted, that I was needed to go to India. So at that moment, I had basically felt this sense of joy and bliss and everything that I could go to India because I now had the means to go, where before I didn't, and because my mother had given me that. I could go buy a new vehicle or whatever, but so that gave me that strong desire. I mean, I knew I would go, and so I made plans to go immediately. So then I came to India in '88 and
88.
came back to India in '88 from '75. So
Yeah.
there were quite a few year lapse. I didn't come to India in those years because I went back to school because Kitty Devi had said, "Oh, have you gone to school? Have you finished? And have you thought about it?" And I said, "Well, I went to school, but I never finished." And she goes, "Oh, you must finish. You must go do that." And so that was in '75 when I had talked to her, '74, '5. So I had a desire that I wanted to finish school, and then I went back to school, and I was married and raising 2 kids, so I had to work nights and go to school days, and she went to school nights and work days. So it was a rough relationship that way. And so I did that for some years, and then I graduated from college.
Is she your Baba lover?
She was, is or not now, I don't know. She's not now, no. She had an experience with Guru Ma, this lady, and somehow I felt connected to her and had some experiences, even though she had seen Baba. In fact, she was very ill one time, and Baba came to her bed. But so let's see.
So Amiya wanted to know a little bit about music.
Yes. This is interesting. That
Well, yeah.
Are you here since 88?
89, yeah.
89 onwards.
6 months each time, and then 91 I got my visa
Yeah.
and came. So
What do you feel like now, being here on this time?
well, it's been
hot, humid, and absolutely different kind of climate.
well. I always felt a connection to India, even when I came those times and stayed for 4 months. I felt more of a connection to India than America. I mean, it was more second nature.
Yeah.
I think I'd been here before at some point in another life, maybe closely. So I felt comfortable, and I'd always been interested in music. I never expressed music at all for years. My mother played piano and organ and played music for churches and cantatas and all that stuff, and organ, played pipe organ. And I always sort of, I guess, denied any musical ability and never tried, and always sort of felt a desire to want to do music, to play, to sing. And I think I even bought a guitar when I was living in Northern California. I bought a guitar, and I very rarely played it because somehow I didn't really have the time, even though I probably had time to do it. I just didn't do it. I'd once in a while pick it up, but not enough to really learn it or learn how to do it. So it wasn't really till I came to India where I obviously had an hour a day or something where I could commit to playing and practicing. And obviously I never really sang any other songs except Baba songs. I never learned any other. So that's all I've ever sung. So in the last 10 years or so, I've started singing and playing. And that to me has been a wonder. I mean, my own personal journey with that is that when I would spend hours like in the Rahuri cabin or somewhere alone, and I have wonderful experiences of feeling Baba, tremendous experiences. So that's kind of my meditation that I do. And in fact, I don't even sing much of the songs that I would sing there alone with him, but I'm learning to get them out. I mean, either the ones I do or I make up, but so I sing other people's because I feel more comfortable that somebody doesn't want to hear mine. But that's changing, and I mean, there's been a transformation over a long time, because before, where I would feel so self-conscious to even have to play in front of someone or even someone nearby.
It's hard playing up to Samadhi.
Yeah.
The Samadhi is the most difficult audience I've ever
Yeah, most people have said that.
I
That
can play down here in Hostel A, flawless guitar. I get up there, I'm always going to make mistakes.
yeah, it's weird. It's a weird.
It's very strange. Well, okay.
Now the other thing is I had, because it does ramble on. I've had a couple dreams, and I've had the experience with Mani. Now I don't know.
I think we have really good stuff from you. We'll find stuff we can put in it. There is one thing that Amiya always asks at the end. He asks, "Have you anything you'd like to say to the younger generation of bottle lovers coming along now? Any advice or any views that you have about what they ought to do, or any encouragement for them, or anything like that?"
Uh-huh.
We're running.
Yeah, it's kind of a, it's something that I see here because I see a lot of young people come, and I have my experiences, which are my own experiences with Baba and the way I look at the world, and I really see how important what that experience of Baba is to me, and what it meant in my life, and how it is always ongoing, and it's always unfolding. And I can kind of remember, I guess, back to that time when the uncertainty or the adolescence of thinking, in a sense, and it's kind of like Baba is there. I mean, I feel that Baba is really there supporting everyone, and what I see here, I see people coming that are, I think, going to be the new humanity. They are going to be the ones that really have to take in Baba's flag and carry it on, because they have that spark. They have something that a lot of, well, even older people don't have. They have that spark, and yet they don't even appreciate it. They don't know what to do with it. And it's a matter of directing that, maybe organizing that, and maybe that's where that whole thing I avoided in my life, which was like avoiding the organizational mind or the organizational life. And now seeing that Baba's given that torch to them, and they have to take up and carry that torch and move forward, with Baba. And his support is there, and his love is there, and I think it's a wonderful time. I think they're going through a trying time. I mean, everyone who is young going through something says their time was harder, but I think in terms of what I see in the world, they have a harder time, because there's less for them to really attach to, except to find that kernel of Baba, and to really hold on to that, and to make that a working force in their life daily, so that everything they do.
Do you think that they are more frustrated than our generations used to be?
I don't know about more. I think that times are more chaotic. I mean, I know in my generation they were chaotic, but they were also coming from a stable sense, because the 50s were a real solid, stable, almost boring existence, where families did everything the same. They followed everything the same. Everything was cut and dried. Now it's just, I know the kids, they don't know what the hell they're going to do. They're after money, or they're after this or that, and very few % are going to get to whatever the world thinks is value, and they're not going to get that value. I mean, the value is Baba. The value is the strength of what you have to attain any of those things and to appreciate them. And with Baba, they'll have that. And I mean, I have seen it in young people who are now, that's a working part of their life, which I don't think I had at that age. I think I was acquiring it, or Baba was working on it, giving that. But some of these young kids, they're putting that into practice, and that's what Baba wants. He wants that to be expressed in life, not to just sit back and think about it, or have it be some concept that's not utilized, and it's put into practice, into service, into work, serving.
Like, what would you like to say to these young guys? I think.
Well, I think
like in Amar Tithi, one more question. Do you think that there is a greater percentage of young people coming to the Amar Tithi than the older ones?
Well, I see a difference in the older ones, which all of us knew, like you guys coming to visit and share Baba coming to Amritithis. I see a lot of them not here, and I do see a lot of younger people. I see a lot of the people connected with those older families. They're the real strong ones. I see a lot of people not knowing what they're
I
doing.
can't make anything out of that. I mean, I can't put that into a text.
Yeah.
You said wonderful stuff to the kids, and it's encouragement.